Hey there, this is Alana Terry. You're listening to the Successful Writer Podcast, and I am here with Roland Denzel. How are you, Roland?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Roland's going to be chatting with us about health and fitness for authors and nutrition. We've basically just our spheres have just intersected. So I'm super curious to kind of hear about your journey and how you got it started doing what you're doing.
Well, I've been an author for a long time and in the health and fitness arena. So I've been, writing health and fitness books. And my personal history was I was overweight growing up for my first 35 years, growing up to my first 35 years, the yo-yo dieting thing. And I'm 54 now, 54. I have to do the math. But so I lost about almost 20 years ago, I lost 110 pounds and I've kept it off ever since. And I got just super interested in health and wellness and fitness. And because I was already interested in writing, that's what I decided to write about. And, it's been a great journey. But then a few years ago, back, I think probably 2015, I started, working more with writers and authors one-off, and decided that was like I really was passionate about helping my fellow author get healthy and stay healthy. Because as you know, as an author yourself, we do so much of our time is like stuck behind a keyboard. So, even if we're on a stand desk, we're still pretty sedentary most of the time. So we have our author challenges as far as health and wellness and ergonomics go. So I built my platform, Indestructible Author, to help people just like you and me.
I love that. What are some of the most common objections? Let's start there, because even when you and I were chatting about like, I would love to have you on the podcast, but how can we make this something people like, not to sound rude, but want to listen to? Because there are so many people who are like, oh, I'm going to worry about my health when it impacts my writing, or I'm going to worry about this when I have my first 50 books out, or I just don't have time to worry about it too much. How do you kind of help overcome some of those initial objections that authors have?
Well, I'm not very extreme. So like, as like a health coach, I'm not one of those, you have to do keto, you have to dive into paleo or do this detox or something like that. So I'm kind of not extreme. And one of the benefits of not being extreme is you can build these little habits over time that do not disrupt your life, but actually like either add to your life. And in the sense of authors, they can actually make you more efficient with your other parts of your life. So you have more time to write. So that's one thing that I like to tell people is like, by sort of doing some things to get yourself healthier, you can give yourself more time to write. And if you're doing things right from a health and fitness perspective, your brain should be more clear. So you're going to have more energy, more focus, and more drive to write and get your creativity out into the world. So those are, I think, some of the two things right there.
That makes a ton of sense, thinking about your brain health, because I know for me, there was back when I was, pumping out a book or two a month, and I'm like, I can't slow down. This is what I've got to do. And what helped me to learn to take the time to do the exercise, first, there was like really, really crippling carpal tunnel, which I'm sure you've seen in a lot of authors. But then there was also this sense of, once I realized that taking some time now to take care of my health now, like, made me more productive now. Like, I wasn't the kind of person who could be like, oh, well, good, if I exercise for an hour a day, that means I might extend my life by 7 years when I'm only in my, at that point in my young 30s and feel fine. So who really cares? But realizing that by taking care of my health, it made like that day more productive. It made my brain that day more creative. That really helped.
That's a big one. Like, where, if you can, I always ask any of my clients to track things. We have, like, in most of my books, I have this thing called a symptom tracker. And it's just almost like, it's a super simple, like, check boxes, like runny nose, watery eyes, trouble breathing, like all, it's all these different things. Mental focus. That's why I have one in the book that I'm writing for authors. I have one. I lean more towards that kind of stuff. Inflammation. So like, sometimes you don't realize you have these things until you see a list of these things and you can check it off. Right. Like, we all go to the doctor and there's like this big long list of things that we never check. Right. But if they add like runny nose, and you go, oh, I do have a runny nose. Right. I do get, like, my eyes do water in the morning. That's weird. Never thought about that. So then what you can do is as you track that, and then after you make some changes, and then like after like a week or 10 days, you go back through that list and you're like, oh, my eyes water less. That's weird. I hadn't noticed it before. And now I notice that it's better.
Yeah.
I hadn't noticed that I had brain fog before because that was like my normal. So
Exactly.
now wow, things are more clear. Right.
Yeah.
And boom. So like now you've noticed, now you can connect those two things after just a week of not very much hard work. And suddenly you're more productive. Suddenly you realize you're more productive. And by connecting those things like that, you can, it's an incentive to keep going.
Yeah. And I can see even like feeling like you're a little bit more in control. Like sometimes you wake up and you just feel like, oh, I'm going to have a bad day because you don't have the energy or you're achy or something. But starting to realize, there were certain things that if you can track them and correlate them to some of your behaviors, there are certain things that you do have more control over than you might think.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the brain fog, because I'm sure that that's one of the most appealing things for authors. Like if every single one of us could be like twice as focused, imagine how many more books we'd write and how much more creative we would be. So what do you see as some of the things that like contribute to brain fog, like the worst culprits, and what are some of the ways to have a clearer, more focused brain?
There's a couple, it comes at us from a couple of different angles. And one of them is we can address the stress part of it later, because there's a lot of things like stress, poor sleep and things like that. There's a little bit obvious, right? So it seems like it would be obvious, but I don't like to lead with sleep because as soon as I talk about getting more sleep, people unsubscribe, right? So like, because you're asking them to fundamentally change their lifestyle, and no one wants to do that, right? So we can talk about that later. We can talk about how to improve your sleep and not change your sleep or get more sleep, right?
Sounds good.
And same with stress, same with stress. But what a lot of the things that do is a lot of authors, it's more, if you go to everyone knows what NaNoWriMo is, National Novel Writing Month, right? At the start of that, there's always these people that are prepping for it. How do you prep for it? How do you get this going, right? What do you do to keep yourself sitting in front of the computer long enough for 1,667 words? Well, the biggest one that I see is snacks, bowl of candy, right? Right. So make sure you have plenty of soda around. And like I'm not like an anti-soda person. I'm an anti-sugar in large amounts person. I'm also an anti-reward yourself with food person, because what happens is it gets you just on this, on this vicious circle of ups and downs with sugar and cravings and things like that. And those can really distract you from writing, from the very writing you're trying to reward yourself for doing. And so it's sort of a self-sabotage type of thing.
What are your thoughts on caffeine intake? Are you gonna caffeine shame us all?
No. I drink coffee. So what I'm going to say is that caffeine is not the end of the world. But what happens is if you continue to, it's like a drug, kind of in the sense that you build up resistance to it, and you have to have more and more and more. So if you continue to do that, there's a certain point where your body, because if you have too much caffeine, you get jittery, right? So you get jittery, you can't fall asleep. Well, those things can still affect you to the same degree, even though the caffeine itself is not helping you focus.
Right.
You lose the focus, despite the fact you still can't sleep,
have all the
and you're jittery. So so the thought is I'm going to have more. I need to have more because I have a deadline. I need to have more because I need to get those last 500 words. But then you can flip yourself over to that tipping point where now you're jittery. Right. And then like you get those words out, it's fine, but now you can't sleep, or you can't sleep as well as you would have without that level of caffeine. So then you wake up in the morning and you're super tired. So it's again with that vicious circle. So I'd say what is, if caffeine works for you, your best, it is your friend if it works for you. And you need to treat it with respect, which means that you have to manage the level you're having. So when you need that friend, it's there for you.
Oh, I love that. That's so smart.
For many people, that could be like 2 cups of coffee a day. Like if I get up 2 cups of coffee a day, right? And one day when I have a deadline, I'm going to use that a third cup of coffee to get me through that
Right.
deadline. That could
Yeah.
be great. But if you then continue to say 3 cups of coffee, and then you get up to 4 cups of coffee, the difference between 4 cups and 5 cups may not do anything for you except to make you jittery and sleep, but not give you
Okay.
that extra bit of focus.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I like your approach of, because it's really hard for anybody to cut anything out cold turkey, but I love this, being more moderate with it. What are some of the things now that we can, instead of like things to avoid for a clearer brain, what are some of the things that we can add in or do that's going to help us have a more focused mind?
Fish oil is a good one, or eating more fish. So this is not like tuna, because tuna doesn't have enough fat. It's really the fat that's in the fish oil or in the fish that has a lot of benefits. You've probably heard of omega-3s.
Yeah.
So omega-3s are we have omega-3s and there's a lot of fats within our body,
Right.
and our system, but the two that we're talking about right now are the omega-3s and the omega-6s. Omega-6s are everywhere. They're not bad for us, but the balance between the 3s and the 6s, when the 6s go up and the 3s go down too low, it can cause inflammation, which can cause brain fog, which can cause aches and pains. And like inflammation, you think of inflammation, right? So inflammation is not just feeling this heat, but it's like an irritation that can manifest itself in your face. Like, so if you're on the verge of carpal tunnel syndrome, extra inflammation can make it worse, or can bring it to the point where, oh, I didn't really feel it before, but now I do. So same with bad backs, bad necks, knees, walking, all those types of things. So you cannot not have omega-6s, but what you can do is you can watch them to bring them down. But you didn't ask about what you can bring down. You asked about what you can add.
Give us good news.
Yeah. So if you eat 2 servings of fatty fish per week, you're really good. That's 2 servings of salmon. And it's okay to eat the salmon skin. That's extra healthy fats. But less fatty fish like tuna, even though the companies want you to, there are omega-3s in there. The companies want you to think it's a good source. It's a good source in the sense that the omega-3s that are in there are certainly good for you, but there's hardly any of them in there.
Yeah.
So you can't really rely on that. So go ahead and you can eat your tuna. It's a great source of protein. But if you're looking for the omega-3s, you want to have salmon is the most common one. But you can also get it in stranger fish. The stranger fish to the Western culture, like mackerel. Mackerel is a good source. Like, when's the last time you had mackerel though?
I don't know that I've ever had mackerel, but we have lots of salmon. I'm in Alaska, so salmon is our absolute best friend up here.
Great. Other things. So my father loved herring, like pickled herring, pepper herring, that kind of stuff. Herring is another one, but you have to eat a lot of it. And anchovies, like it can't just be the anchovies on pizza, because they are a great source of omega-3s, but you'd have to eat so many anchovies in order to make it worth it that you probably
so much pizza.
You're
not telling us to go and eat a lot of pizza.
You have a responsibility to eat extra anchovies on your pizza. Yeah, but the bottom line is like, all those little bits help. So if you like anchovies, it's a great way to get it. And my wife is a fan of anchovies on pizza. I'd never had it before. I thought it was going to be ridiculous, going to be revolting, but it's not. I mean, it's definitely an acquired taste. If you're like the pineapple and Canadian bacon type of person, like an anchovy pizza might be a little bit.
It probably wouldn't go with pineapple, I'm guessing.
I wouldn't think so. Neither culturally or
that's right, or in any other way.
Or from a taste perspective, yeah. So omega-3s are a great one. And if you don't like salmon, then you can have, or you don't like fatty fish, you can have fish oil. That's a great way to do it. If you cannot have fish for some reason, either you're allergic or you're a vegan, you can have. You can't just use flax. Like flax things, they don't really count. It's a different type of omega-3. So you would want to look for an algae oil supplement.
Interesting. I've never even heard of that.
Algae oil.
Okay.
Yeah. And some vegetarians are not. There's one you can get from krill oil. You know what krill is? It's the stuff that whales.
Right.
Whale. Right? Biggest animal in the world eats the littlest things.
Yeah.
But they can make omega-3 oil out of krill as well. And it's a pretty sustainable way to go. So if you're not adverse to that, so that's like but that's counts as a shellfish. So if you have a shellfish
Oh,
allergy,
okay.
not that.
Mhm.
You have a fish allergy, not the salmon, then you're going to be on
Yeah.
the algae oil arena. Yeah.
Okay. What about from your own author journey? Were you writing books before you went on your weight loss journey, or did that come after?
I wrote a novel before I was on my weight loss journey, but I'm going to call it my practice novel.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's, like
Lots of
those
us have one of
characters are still
those.
with me. I know those characters are still with me, and they're making their way into my current novels.
Oh, fun.
But it was not. Yeah, I actually went through it back then. I went through it. I went through I have an old hard drive, and I pulled it up. I saw it. And I'm like, oh, but the story's pretty good. But like, there was head hopping, all sorts of things
I
that you do.
I
Like,
know.
so that you just didn't know, right? Like, so before
Exactly.
that, I had just written a bunch of short stories, and short stories are so
Okay.
much simpler
Uh-huh.
and, less dialogue, or like two people's dialogues. There wasn't a lot of head hopping.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then, so that was really I wrote science fiction stories and things like that, but not really writing to publish it at that point. And a bunch of screenplays that never got published.
Oh, that's really fun. Yeah. Well, I'm really curious if you can compare kind of your before, during, and after as you got healthier. How did you see that impact your writing energy, your creative stamina? How did it, hopefully it improved your ability to write? And I would love to hear some of the details of that.
Yeah, it really did. Like, there were so many times when, everyone gets, I'm not one of those people that doesn't believe in writer's block, because I've had it, and I understand what people say.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as writer's block. You just have to sit there and do it. Well, but you can just sit there and not have to do it. So there's techniques to get through it. So I used to have it, and I also used to have the brain fog.
Yeah.
And I would just I really want to write this story. I have here's the tagline for the story I want to write. Here's the character. And I would just where do I start? So that was a big one. That really helped. Helped me just getting that. But then you mentioned carpal tunnel syndrome. I had carpal tunnel syndrome as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was before I was writing all these books. I worked for I was a printing and publishing consultant.
Oh, uh-huh.
And there's a lot of typing involved, like at customer sites, emailing, documenting things, blogging, like all those types of things that I did for that company. That was a lot of typing as well. And carpal tunnel syndrome was like a big deal. And it really sort of sidelined me for a while. So, but I did notice that there were some big changes. And also things like my back got better. The more, as the healthier I got, my back got better. So I didn't have a bad back, but just, sitting there for a long period of time, I would get up and I'd be like kind of hunched over like an old man, even though at the time I was only like in my 30s. I'd be like, right. Yeah. So there were some big changes there. And then as I was really like super into like not hardcore fitness, but like really like hit it hard, right? That kind of stuff. And when I first started out, and I toned things down more because I enjoy exercise, but I don't love it. Like I do not identify as like, I'm not like one of those people that fitness is the forefront of my life.
Right.
Health is. Right? Health is. And there's lots of ways to be healthy without like doing CrossFit or Olympic weightlifting or being like a hard, intermittent fast. I do like intermittent fasting, but like you don't have to be keto or all those types of things or hardcore paleo in order to be healthy. You just have to have a collection of good habits and systems that you've built over time.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that's going to be really encouraging for people to hear. Because again, I think the biggest objection is going to be, well, I don't want to slow down my writing to focus on something that just might help me, 10 or 20 or 30 years from now. But when you can see, it can help you right now.
But what if you could spend a half an hour or a couple hours on Sunday and get 4 hours, like 2 hours on Sunday gives you 4 hours more writing time. Right. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about. Or the same amount of writing time, you can end up writing more words.
Yeah. What are some of the, I know that fitness is really nice because it doesn't have to be one size fits all. But for somebody listening who still hasn't found any kind of exercise that they like, what do you see are some of the types of exercise that many writers tends to do well with?
So the first thing it's like a cliche, but the more walking you can do, the better. The more walking you can do, the better. Like if you're already doing an average of 10,000 steps a day, so like 70,000 steps a week, you don't really need to walk more, right?
Okay.
But then that's when you can look at walking more often. So even though you don't like, there's this quest for more steps, but there's like a diminishing return after a certain point. You want to get a regular amount of steps. But the more you can break up your day with tiny little walks, the better you're going to be in a variety, in so many ways. Not only is it going to make your body feel better, because the longer you stay, for people who are, let's see, I'm doing my hand like an L. You know what your body looks like when you're in a chair, right? Your back, and then you curve your hips, and then your knees go down. So you're like that shape. So if you stay in that shape even if you're in like the world's best ergonomic chair, you're still locked in that shape for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, right? The science of ergonomics is designed to keep us in a position that's comfortable enough for a long enough period of time so we can do more work. Well, that's not that might sound like the ideal thing, but it's not the ideal thing for our body. And in the long run, that's going to bring us down. That's going to make us write fewer words. So if you've done a writing NaNoWriMo again, right? I got to get these words out. So you might sit longer. I can't get up and take a break. I'm going to hold in my pee. I'm going to not go get a drink of water, whatever. I'm going to sit there. I'm just going to keep knocking it out. I'm going to keep knocking it out. Then you get up and then you're like, oh, I feel like I'm still in the shape of a chair, right? And it takes you like walking to the bathroom and back a couple of times, or walking to the kitchen and back. And then when you sit down in that chair again, you're like, oh, okay, I'm back in that position. Well, that's because your tissues have firmed up on one side and they've loosened up on the other. So you are sort of locked in that position. And over time, that triggers your body to accept that position as the position that it's going to be in for a significant amount of time. And it's hard to get out of that. And what happens is then it's when you do want to be active, when you are done and you want to go play with your kids, or you want to go play with your dog, then that's when you bend down to tie your shoe, and it's a different position for you, and you're like, oh, my back.
You can't unfold yourself afterwards.
And then like, not to be too scary, but then like that's when your back hurts. And then like when your back hurts, it's really hard to write.
It is.
It's really hard to write. When your hands hurt, even though you can do all the movements, it's really hard to write, because even if you think you can write through it, your brain is wasting, I call them like CPU cycles, right? To use computer terminology. It's wasting these CPU cycles on doing something. It's like an application that's running crazy and slowing your computer down. But you are the computer. You are the computer, because it's wasting time managing this pain.
Yeah. So are you a big fan of stand-up desks? Like, if you could, would you convince every single writer to have a stand-up desk? Or what are some of your best ergonomic tips for people?
If I could, I would convince everybody to have a sit-stand desk.
Okay.
Right? So the difference between a sit-stand desk and a stand-up desk is the sit-stand desk can go up and down. So you can use it for sitting and for standing, or ideally in the places in between, right? So like you can have I'm on a sit-stand desk right now, and I can lower it down, sit on a regular chair. I have a couple of chairs in here that I've just collected, but one of them is a stool, like one of those leaning stools. So I can lower it sort of halfway, and I can be on this leaning stool. Right. So that's different. So there's no ideal position for the human body, because the human body is not meant to be in one position for a long period of time. But so what you can do is find a variety of positions: sit differently, stand differently, in between, and like mix these things up and then change them up periodically. You don't have to change them up in the middle of your writing session. That can be like disruptive.
Right.
But when you take a natural break, or you switch projects, or when you switch from writing your book to checking your emails or going on social media, that's often a good time to switch between sitting and standing and or change your chair out, or something like that.
No, that makes sense. Well, and even when I teach
but-
productivity for authors, there's a sense of like, sometimes it's really nice to be like, do your first draft over here and then come over to this place to do your admin work. So you get that mental separation. And the way you're talking about, you could do that even without moving, you know, you just change the level of your desk or your posture or something.
Yeah. So for many years, I didn't have a sit stand desk, but we lived in a condominium that had for me, I'm 6'2". So we had a kitchen counter that was the perfect height for my laptop. So I could put the laptop on there, boom. And then over there, I had the kitchen table because I didn't have my own office. We had a small condo. So I would use the kitchen table. And like, I was the only one home. My wife she has a studio down the street. So like, I would be the only one home.
Yeah.
My kids were off at school and stuff. So I could work the kitchen table undisturbed. When I wanted to change, I would pick up my laptop and move it over to the countertop. It's like a bar style counter. And we'd do that. Well, then over time, I found that I really liked that. So I found a way to raise up my laptop. So now it was more at eye level. So like, I'm no longer looking down, right? So that was an addition. Then I added a better Bluetooth keyboard instead of a USB keyboard. So now I can seamlessly switch back and forth between these things, between these different positions. My wife, she's 5'1", 5'2" if you ask her. And she's not tall enough. The countertop was too tall, like by a lot, right? So what she would do is she could use the same table, but she's also extremely mobile and flexible. And she can actually squat down at a little table and write.
Oh, wow.
Crazy, right? So you've seen people like, pictures of people like in Japan or China, and they're like sitting there, like squatting down on the ground, working stuff. That's my wife. She can do that. And so she could sit at a desk or a table, sit on the floor. And then we had she would take a little box and she could go in our kitchen, which is sort of facing the counter from the other side. So we didn't do it off at the same time, because then it's like one of those
staring at each other.
Right? Yeah. But she had this little box where a couple of cookbooks, put them down, and then it's the perfect height, and she would do that. So these are great ways to even you could get started today, because you don't have to make a big investment to get started with a sit stand desk. You just have to find something within your house, apartment, condo, work environment, school, or whatever, that you can get to the right height to do sit stand desk. See if you like it. And that's when you can decide, I've seen some improvement here. It's worth an investment.
Yeah. I remember I was at the 20 Books conference in Vegas several years ago, and I had a free afternoon and I wanted to get some writing. And so I actually ended up setting up the hotel ironing board and turned that into the stand-up desk. And same thing, it was the right height. So I had my keyboard on the ironing board, and I think I like raised my laptop up on their big phone book, and it worked out great.
That's great. Yeah. I've collected little things over the years. So like I can show you, but so I like this little Bluetooth keyboard, right? And it's nice because it actually lets me switch between my phone, a tablet, and my computer, like with the push of a button. And then I have this portable little device that just folds out, and it holds my laptop up at eye level, like closer to eye level. So I have this picture when I was at 20 Books. We may have passed each other while we were there, right? But when I would go back to write, I had this thing set up. I would just, have like a little optimized standing desk, because the TV thing was tall enough in my room to where all I had to do is push this thing on, and I could use it as a little standing desk. So
that's cool.
It was nice.
Well, that's a good segue. I wanted to let our listeners know about one of the services you offer, and that's a free ergonomic consult, right? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So like a lot of people they just don't know where to start. And I do consulting this way, but I do free assessment for people who want to check it out. So I do like a little customized program for people if they're interested, where we can use Zoom or whatever sort of video things, and I can sort of find out like what style of writer you are, like how much writing do you do, how much other things do you do, tell me a little bit about your lifestyle and all those types of things. And then I get a video of their of their office. I usually do a video of my office as well, so we feel some solidarity.
Right.
So they know that, because I do not have what you would consider the ideal ergonomic office. Like, it's not like a showroom of an ergonomic office.
Right.
My wife's, on the other hand, which she built from scratch to be this way, this last year, looks like a design studio for an ergonomic office. Yeah, but there's so many things in between. So I help people, and then a lot of times people don't usually come to me just to get an ergonomic setup. Usually they have some sort of a problem. They have carpal tunnel syndrome.
Right.
I'm holding up my hands as if everyone can see. So they have carpal tunnel syndrome, or they have a bad back. So there are, as a restorative exercise specialist, I also have the ability to create a program that's customized for them, and which involves stretching, relaxation techniques, because there's like nerve flossing. There's these different things that you can do that can really, that are simple, that you can do at your desk or in between writing sprints or sessions, that can have a tremendous value on your pain, on your health, and on your writing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And how can people get to that? How can they find you to sign up?
If the easiest way is, if you go to my website is indestructibleauthor.com.
I love that. That's such a cool title.
And then you can just go to, there's I think it's /ergonomics, but there's a row of buttons there in the top or in the menu, and you can just you can check that out there. Let me make sure. I just made some changes.
I want to make sure that people can still get there.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Ergonomics is great. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Well, I remember between my first and second book, I got carpal tunnel so bad. I basically had to step away from any computering for about 6 weeks. And it was devastating, so as a brand new author, for one thing, like, I've just reached this dream that I've been dreaming about since I was 3 years old. And now, like, because I'm melodramatic, it feels like I'm never going to be able to type another word again. But going through that, it made me realize, okay, I can't treat my body like a completely, renewable resource. Like, it's always going to be there. I'm always going to have this same amount of energy. I'm always going to be as healthy as I am. And I realized, like, I need to treat my body like a teammate. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to work my employee to the point where they're like in bed for 6 weeks. So why would I do that to my wrists? And so, especially like for anybody listening who's never dealt with that, and like, oh, I can sit slouched in my bed, and type for 4 hours. Well, maybe you can right now, but please at least make everybody listening, whether you've been doing this forever or not, like, if you can make one positive change, that's going to increase your longevity, your creativity. For people listening who are really, really young, who have never dealt with any of this, just trust me, like, it's easier to not go through carpal tunnel. Like, it's easier to prevent it than to try to work through it. Same thing, eye strain, back and neck issues. Don't take it for granted. So well, before we sign off, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, like, one of the biggest pushbacks I get, or at least, or feel, right, when I talk to people about making changes, is, so somebody, imagine you're an author and you're writing okay, but you're starting to feel these pains, right? Or you're writing a couple thousand words a day and you're starting to feel these pains, and you come to me and you ask for advice, and I give you some, and you're like, I can't do that because I'm not going to be able to write those 2,000 words per day because I need to make these changes, right? And I'm in this groove. I have this perfect desk. I have this, I have these things. I have these rhythms. I'm not asking you to change those things right now, because all of the changes that I would suggest to you can happen during your non-writing time.
Oh, nice.
Right. So how much emailing do you do? Right? You can change that. That's the time to train, to work on your sit, stand, desk habits.
Right.
You can, like, if you feel like, oh, my creative brain turns off when I stand up, fine, keep sitting down for that. But do you really need to be have your creative brain turned on when you're scrolling Facebook? No, you
Right.
can stand up for that and you can use it there. You can answer emails from a standing position, probably
Right.
not a problem. And it's right. And it's the same thing when I talk about the Pomodoro. Like when I suggest people the
Mhm.
Pomodoro, they're like, oh, I would never going to do that because I'm not going to interrupt my writing right in the
Yeah.
middle when that little bing goes off,
Uh-huh.
right? Well, you don't have to. You can practice with the Pomodoro during emails. You can practice with the
Yeah.
Pomodoro during putting your taxes together, like whatever, like all these different
Mhm.
things that
Mhm.
you don't care about. In fact, I call this thing the reverse Pomodoro, where I say, take the things that you want to limit, like your social media time,
Right. Right.
and say, I'm going to do a Pomodoro, which is 25 minutes,
Mhm.
right? I'm going to
Mhm.
do one Pomodoro of Facebook.
Yeah.
And then when that thing bings, oh, I'm
You're
done. No more
done.
Facebook, right? So like
Mhm.
you can actually train yourself to use like this Pomodoro and any
Yeah.
healthy habit like this by sort of reversing it and saving, because you can always adjust your writing time later.
Right. No, that makes a ton of sense. I started Pomodoro after I got back to writing between book 1 and 2 with that really bad carpal tunnel. And I was really, really nervous. Like, no, when I'm in the groove, nothing's going to pull me out of that groove, but I knew I had to do it so that I could stretch my wrists and give my wrists a break. And I found like from day one, like it worked for me from day one. I found that by doing shorter sprints, knowing that there was just even a small 5-minute break coming, like it increased my stamina from day one. And so I was sold from probably like sprint
Yeah.
number 2. I was like, okay, I'm always going to be doing this. But yeah, I love starting with the non-writing piece because you're right. We're so protective of the systems that we've already come up with that help us feel in the flow and to help us do our stuff. And we don't want to mess up with that. We don't want to give up our coffee when we're
Yeah.
starting the morning with our first draft or things like that. But yeah, for some of the other things that
Right.
don't require that amount of focus, I think that's perfect. One more question for you before we close up.
Sure.
What recommendations would you give? Let's say that there's an author listening who's pretty active, pretty healthy, like is feeling pretty good. They pay some attention to ergonomics. Like, what's one thing that someone in that kind of situation could add or do or change that would improve their life even more, would you say?
Like a device, like a tool, are you talking about,
Anything,
or a
any
practice?
tip, hack? Yeah.
Um, I would say finding a way, it's really finding a way to move more often, I think,
Mm-hmm.
is the biggest one. We have the culture tells us to move more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And moving more is fine, like we talked about before, but moving more often is a big thing. It has so many benefits. And coincidentally, the studies that they did on moving more often also line up pretty well with the Pomodoro.
Oh,
So
okay.
what they
Mm-hmm.
let me give you one example. They did some studies of people in administrative assistants in an office, and they said they put them into 3 categories:
Mm-hmm.
save your filing and mail delivery till the end of your shift or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was every 30 minutes, go spend 5 minutes walking around and doing that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the last group was spend at 30 minutes working and then do 5 minutes of exercise.
Okay.
And what they found was the 2 groups that broke it up by 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
their blood sugar was 20% lower.
Wow.
Their insulin resistance was improved by 20%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they started to lose weight even with no other changes. Also, in a related study by a different group, by doing this 30 minutes of getting up and moving around, 30 minutes or 25 minutes and 5 minutes, 25,
Uh-huh.
5, they were able to, people were able to think more clearly when they came back down. It took a period of adjustment, of doing this for a
Mm-hmm.
while,
Mm-hmm.
but then when they sat back down, they were able to think more clearly, get more work done. And just once they got in the habit of doing this, they were able to produce a lot more work and able to focus on single tasks longer. A lot of us either have ADD or self-diagnosed ADD.
Mhm.
Like very few adults are ADHD. I don't
Mhm.
see a lot of hyper people, but
Mhm.
we do have a tendency to not focus very clearly.
Mhm.
And whether it's a true diagnosis or not, whether you
Right.
have ADD or not, or whether you're just distracted like I
Yeah.
am, right?
Mhm.
You can improve your focus by allowing yourself to be single tasking for just that 25 to 35 minutes,
Mhm.
25 to 30 minutes, giving yourself a tiny little break. Because if I give myself a long break, I say I'm going to work for 2 hours. Well,
Uh-huh.
2 hours is a long time to not check your email. 2 hours is a
Yeah.
long time to not pick up your phone and check to see if you had a text message. A lot of stuff can happen in 2 hours, but we can tell ourselves that the world is not going to come to an end in the next 30 minutes. So therefore, I
Mhm.
can give
Mhm.
myself permission to not do it. And that
Yeah.
giving yourself permission is a huge part in increasing your productivity
Yeah. Well, and I know when I'm faced with a
and your health.
long, yeah, when I'm faced with a long chunk of time, it's also easier to procrastinate because I'm like, okay, well, I need to pace myself. Like back when we have 3 kids and they're like 12 to 16. So they're older now, but back when they were quite a bit younger and my day involved quite a bit more like hands-on parenting, but I was still writing. My husband took them for like a day-long field trip with their homeschool group. And I was so excited because I was going to get like 14 hours like with the house all to myself. It was the very first time like in my life I'd had that much alone time, I think. But what I found was like I probably didn't start my writing day till like 10 in the morning. Like I'd been up for 3 or 4 hours by then because I was like, well, I've got all day. But when you've just got, okay, I've got this, hour of time, I've got this 30-minute pocket of time. It helps you it does help you to focus because that's all that you're doing. So fabulous. Well, thank you
Yes,
so
yeah.
much.
There's so many stories of authors who have like they they wrote their first 5 or 6, 10 books like at their lunch hours or before work. And then
Mhm.
when they went full time, they really struggled to write because they
Yeah.
had all day to write. So what they had to
Mhm.
do was they had to figure out a way to sort of artificially create
Exactly.
those deadlines and work environments and the
Mhm.
not a deadline like the long-term deadline, but the like, oh, I
Right.
only have an hour to write because I have these other things scheduled,
Yep.
right? So using a
Mhm.
calendar and scheduling things and thinking about it more as a work thing
Yeah.
can really help. Can really help. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks again. It was fun chatting with you. It was fun for me to switch gears from talking just about the marketing sides to, yeah, helping people see how important it is to take care of yourself for your mental clarity, for your longevity, and really for your just creative health as well. So thanks again.
That was a lot of
And
fun. Thank you for having
yeah,
me.
so if anybody wants to check out the Indestructible Author, did I get that right?
Indestructibleauthor.com.
Fabulous.
And if you want to go to, if you're interested in the ergonomics specifically, indestructibleauthor.com/ergonomics.
And the books that you have for authors, when do you expect those to be out? Is there a date yet?
I think probably I'm editing the author brain, which is the one that's more on like mental focus, writer's block,
Yeah,
inflammation, and all
that
that. I'm
sounds
editing that
awesome.
now, so I'm hoping within the next month or so
Oh,
it should
fabulous.
be ready to go.
Great. Well, thanks again for
Yeah.
taking time to chat with us today.